Alright, welcome back to WMAC Now with your host Chuck Stevenson. Coming at you tonight with a special fight review. So we're going to Singapore for ONE Championship, ONE X. We're going to the main event. Atomweight Championship, that's 115 pounds in ONE Championship. The champ making her long-awaited return, Angela Lee, coming into the fight at 10-2, taking on the Atomweight Grand Prix champ, Stamp Fairtex, coming in at 8-1. So this fight is kind of been a long time in the making. Once after the COVID break, Angela Lee, the champ, got pregnant. So then they, ONE Championship was decided, well, what do we do? Well, then they came up with the Atomweight Grand Prix, and then that took forever to get going. And then all kinds of shenanigans happened with it, but in the end, the homegrown fighter, Stamp Fairtex, came away the winner in that, getting her this title shot at ONE Championship, ONE X, the 10th anniversary show for ONE. So this was a lot of questions going into this fight. Big one being, how will Lee look after almost 2.5 years away? And has the challenger, Stamp Fairtex, done enough to compete? And the whole point of this fight was we were going to find out. So let's get into it. Okay, so first round. Lee storms across the cage, pressuring early. Stamp circled away, eats a right hand, but Lee punched into the clinch. Lee looked for takedown. Stamp managed to escape out the back and separate. Lee again pressured forward, striking into the clinch again. Stamp stops the takedowns again and separates. Stamp throws a low kick. Lee again comes forward, and Stamp hammers a left hook to Lee's right side. Lee's hurt. She is hurt. She's visibly hurt, bent over. You could see it on her face. She backs all the way across the cage. Stamp follows, throwing some strikes there. Stamp keeps throwing a little bit, but Lee manages to survive and circles out. Lee is still visibly hurt though, and she shoots for a takedown. And she's hurt because Lee never shoots for a takedown. It's always in the clinch. So Lee going for a desperation takedown here. Stamp defends the takedown. Doesn't really take advantage of the disadvantage. Lee doesn't really attack on the ground though. But Stamp does defend. She manages to stand, but Lee very smartly keeps a hold of the leg and converts it to the clinch. Lee then goes for the body lock, gets the body lock, trips Stamp down, and takes Stamp's back. Stamp spends the final minute and change defending with Lee on her back. Super exciting first round. Both fighters doing big things in it. Obviously, the biggest thing though was Stamp having Lee hurt. So we go to the second round, and Lee again pressures forward, taking not only the center of the cage, but she just rushes out, pressure Stamp to the cage. Lee gets to a body lock, trip, takedown to side control, and then Lee just starts chaining submission attempts after submission attempt. She goes for a crucifix, then goes for a straight arm bar, goes for the triangle, goes for the arm triangle, or the triangle arm bar rather. Stamp manages to scramble, but Lee stays absolutely glued to her. Gets some ground and pound from the turtle position on top, and then Lee takes the back again. Excuse me. Lee traps the leg, and I knew exactly what she was doing too. As soon as she trapped one leg with both of hers, she goes for the twister, locks it on. It looks tight, but Stamp, and I gotta give her credit for this one, she looked in pain, but she manages to survive. So rather than keep going for the twister, Lee lets it go to side control. Stamp, though, swung her legs around, went for an arm bar, but it was just too loose. Lee already had her elbow past the danger point, the fulcrum point. So Lee mounts Stamp, and Stamp, rolls over. So Lee slaps on the rear naked choke. Stamp fights it for a couple seconds, but then is forced to submit. The official time of the finish is 4 minutes 50 seconds for your winner, still the ONE Atomweight champion, Angela Lee. So the champ is back 2.5 years later from her last fight, she picks up exactly where she left off. And I put emphasis on it, and I'm going to come back to it later. But she picks up exactly where she left off. You know, Stamp, she defended well on the ground, but let's be honest here. We all knew that if it went to the ground, it was likely going to be Lee's experience ruling the day, and Lee has a size advantage as well. Now, Stamp had Lee on the ropes, and Lee tried to downplay it in a post-fight interview and backstage. But let's be honest here. Stamp legit had Lee on the ropes in the first round after that hook to the body. But she failed to properly capitalize. You know, she got too close to Lee, didn't pick her shots carefully, didn't really pour it on enough, and allowed Lee to circle out and reset for that takedown. And I gotta be honest, I've seen other female fights, particularly in ONE Championship, stopped for less. I'm gonna catch some flack for this because there are a lot of Angela Lee stans out there. But if that were another fighter besides Angela Lee, I think that fight would have been stopped right there. I mean, she was literally doubled over, backed all the way across the cage, and then ate a couple more shots. I think there's a good argument that were it somebody else, the fight would have been stopped. Anyway, back to my notes here. No, it's funny. 7 years later, Angela Lee is still trying to repeat the twister. And I had a feeling that she was going to go for it because they were building up to it in the last week or so leading up to the fight. And they kept talking about the legendary twister that Lee got against Natalie Hills. I'm like, I'll bet she goes for that submission again. She tried it again against Estela Nunes and failed to get it, and then did it again here. So I'm not really surprised by that. But listen, I'm not trying to bash Angela Lee here. Not too much anyway, because she did win. And for all her flaws, Lee is still a step above the division. Granted, she has a size advantage in, I think, every fight she's ever fought and won. But overall, she knows she goes in there and it manages to implement her game plan every time. She's still a bit a step above. She's not flawless, but she manages to work through it. And the rest of the ladies in this division, they need to catch up. The big question is, even if they do catch up, can they deal with the physicality? Because I think that was the biggest problem Stamp had in this fight, was dealing with the physicality of Angela. All right, so let's talk things to work on. Let's start with the champ first. For Lee, striking defense. Striking defense, striking defense, striking defense. 2.5 years away, she still has none. And that's why I emphasize that she picked up exactly where she left off. Because how do you have 2.5 years off to improve your game? Now, yes, she was pregnant and recovered. That's 9 months pregnancy, which she still was training well into the pregnancy, and then a couple months afterwards to recover, and then she got back to training. But overall, 2.5 years away from the sport. How do you not improve your striking defense? She still eats shots to the head, she doesn't protect her head, and she has zero defense for the body. This is the second time we've seen Angela Lee seriously hurt to the body. First time it resulted in a finish. This time it almost did. So she still has no striking defense. So she's got to work on that. Also, a weak core. And this one's baffling to me, because how are you a grappling-based fighter, a wrestler, a submission grappler, and how do you manage to have a weak core like that, where as soon as someone touches it, you just fold over? I don't understand that. So she's got to work on her core. And there are a ton of exercises out there to strengthen the core. I mean, there's whole workout series based on strengthening the core. Also, focus on high probability submissions, okay? Yeah, the twister's great. It's a painful submission, but it is absolutely low probability. You got it. Be happy with that and move on. Focus on the high probability submissions. Also, again, I'm going to sound like I'm bashing here, but there's a reason behind what I'm going to say next. She needs to find some humility, okay? Because, again, she really tried to play off how bad Stamp had her in the second round. She's like, oh, I had a baby, and no pain compares to that. You were literally doubled over, backing all the way across the cage. You were hurt. You were legitimately on the ropes. You were hurt so bad that you shot for a takedown. Angela Lee never shoots for takedowns. She always goes for takedowns from the clinch against the cage. Admit that you were hurt. Just say, yeah, she got me good. I had to fight through it. Find some humility, because otherwise, if you don't find that humility, you're not going to grow as a fighter. Because having that humility allows you to look at your mistakes and your weaknesses and then find ways to improve. So while it sounds like it's bashing, it's actually sound advice. Alright, for Stamp. I gotta go for Stamp too. She needs to stop letting her opponents dictate the fight. She is way too fast to let opponents back her up against the cage. And I mentioned in my preview that she does not want to let Lee back her against the cage, because that's what Lee likes to do in order to get her takedowns. And that's exactly what Lee did, and Stamp just let her run across the cage practically. I mean, Lee practically ran across the cage. Stamp let her get away with it and let her dictate the pace and the area. So she's got to stop letting her opponents dictate the cage control. And stop letting them back her up to the cage. Also, Stamp just did not pour it on enough when she had Angela hurt. And not only did she not pour it on enough, she didn't keep working the body. Keep working the body. You got her hurt to the body. You got to work the body some more, because that's how you're going to hurt her some more. That's what Seong Jin-nan did. When Seong Jin-nan had her hurt to the body, she didn't just start striking to the head. She worked the body and the head, and it was a final kick to the body that had Lee turning away and caused the fight to end. So when you have an opponent hurt, you've got to pour it on, but you also got to recognize what hurt your opponent and work that. Also, and this drove me nuts leading up to the fight, kept saying, oh, Angela Lee's my idol. I get to fight my idol. Angela Lee's your idol. Stop idolizing your opponents. Okay? Angela Lee is only 1 year older than Stamp. Why are you idolizing someone who's only a year older than you? If you're gonna find someone to idolize, look for someone who really paved the way, like older than you, or something else. But don't idolize a future opponent like that, especially someone who's like that close to you in age. And you had more fights in the last 2.5 years than almost as many fights in that time as she had in her whole MMA career. So stop idolizing opponents. Alright, enough, talking about things to work on, which kind of devolved into borderline bashing fighters. Let's talk about fights to make for Stamp. So she's probably a little while away from getting another title shot, especially getting finished in the second round. So she's got to take a little bit of a step down. Not necessarily a tune-up, but I think a step down. I think a Stamp fight against Lin Ha-chin would be super exciting. You've got two primarily striker fighters against each other. And Lin was ranked up until right before the Grand Prix started. And she's coming off a win over Bi Nguyen. So they have a common opponent between the two of them. And they both have very exciting striking styles. I think Stamp versus Lin Ha-chin would be a really fun fight to watch. And it'd be a good chance for Stamp to get her mojo back going, if she turns out to be better than Lin. For Lee. So afterwards, she went backstage and she was still talking about wanting to challenge Seong for the strawweight 125-pound title. It might happen, it might not. But if it doesn't happen, okay, let's focus on the atomweight division for now. And Sion mentioned that that she might come for the atomweight title herself. Let's assume neither of those fights happen in either division. Seo Hee-ham has absolutely earned a title shot now. She had to beat Denise Zamboanga twice. First time she faced her, Denise was the number 1 opponent, number 1 ranked fighter, below Angela. They weren't satisfied with the results, so they ran it back. It was too close of a fight, and Ham absolutely handled her. So Seo Hee-ham has absolutely earned her shot against Angela Lee. Will she beat Lee? I don't know. I think Seo Hee-ham is an overall better fighter than Angela Lee, but I think the physicality factor, the size difference, is going to play a big part if that fight happens. So we'll have to see. If that fight gets made, I'm going to reserve my judgment until I see them actually standing next to each other. I need to see the size difference there. Because if they're relatively close to the same size, then I would favor Ham. But Lee so far has just been bigger than all of her opponents. So we'll see. But I think that is absolutely the fight to make in the atomweight division. So anyway, those are my thoughts on this bout. Angela Lee coming back, the champ, defeating the Grand Prix champ, retaining her title via second round submission due to rear naked choke. Let me know your thoughts on the fight in the comments down below. If you liked the video, please give it a like, share it as well. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe to WMMAC Now, the best, most complete women's mixed martial arts dedicated platform on YouTube. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.